In today's show, we're going to build a custom SharePoint list form using PowerApps. So we're going to go in, we're going to learn the basics. How do you get started with it? What does that SharePoint integration experience thing over there on the left mean? Talk about how the different buttons work, give you a couple of tips and tricks to get started, and hopefully lay a really nice foundation so in future videos, we can make some crazy stuff with our SharePoint custom list forms. Sound like fun? I thought so. But first, here's our intro. Hi, my name is Shane Young with PowerApps 911. Those guys. In today's show, we're going to dive into SharePoint custom list forms. Right? Turns out that that's a pretty popular request that people have had for about the last 15 years or so, right? Be able to go in, customize your SharePoint list form so that you can make a better experience for your users editing it or interacting with that data. So what we're going to do is we're going to use PowerApps today, and we're going to talk about how that works. And really the idea is we're going to just make sure you understand all the pieces, a couple of tips and tricks to get you started, but really just lay a foundational video so that in future videos we can do crazy things like, tabbed interfaces or multiple drop downs from different data sources, or a bunch of that crazy stuff people want to do, maybe multiple screens even. But this one is really just that core. Let's get started. Let's do it the right way the first time so we can build upon that and use all of our PowerApp skills to build a better experience as we go. Sound like fun? I thought so. Let's just switch over to my desktop and get started. So over here on my desktop, we're actually going to start with a SharePoint list, right? This is a SharePoint online list, and it's using the modern experience. So if your list is not using the modern experience, you're not going to have these options. And really the way you'll know is PowerApps is right here, right? It's telling us, hey, PowerApps is here. And so if I click on one of my items, you'll see the default SharePoint list experience opens, right? I can edit. And so this is the default SharePoint experience. But up here at the top, I have this option for customize. So if we click on customize, what it's going to do is it's going to launch us over to PowerApps. Okay, so after like 30 seconds, maybe 25, I don't know, I wasn't counting, we're brought in here and you can see that PowerApps and SharePoint work together to make us a list form. So they created us a screen, they put a form on here, they gave us all the fields. You can see some fields are editable, some fields are not. We have this new SharePoint integration thing that we'll talk about in a minute. But boom, just like that, a fully functional form. We did almost no work. Now, what you need to do real quick though, go up here, click on one of these cards, go into whatever property shows up, and just like I want to hit the space bar, and I'm just going to delete it, right? So made a change, undid it, because once I do that, what I can do now is I go over here, I'm going to say File and Save. And so a few seconds that saved my app, and then so we're going to say here, Publish to SharePoint. Yep, I want you to publish it. Okay, so after a few seconds that's done. So here's the first trick I'm going to teach you. If you go back to SharePoint using the link they give you, you have to wait on PowerApps to load and unload all the time. Right now, take advantage of this link right here. Just right click on this guy and say open link in new tab. So then that way we've got, right, we'll just hit back here. We've got one environment here where we're working on the PowerApps and then one with SharePoint. It just cuts down on the back and forth for you. It gets annoying when you build these apps a lot, the back and forth, the loading, the unloading, all that stuff. So it's just easier to have this in two tabs. But so now that we've done that, now if we click on CEO, we're going to see that, look at this. This is a different list. I can tell right away because the higher date format's different. That's how I know that my change took. So if we say edit all though, you can see this is just our PowerApps app over here, right? So the fields that were editable are editable. And then we have this stuff down here at the bottom, which is not editable. We can save, we can cancel, copy link, that type of stuff. So save this, or let's cancel this, it doesn't matter, I didn't change anything. So there you go. So that's all you have to do. Now we have a custom form. But being the PowerApps guru that you are, now you want to go put your tools that you know how to use into place over there, right? And if you're brand new to PowerApps, you're here and you're like, I've never done PowerApps. I don't know all these crazy, PowerApps things you're about to do. No problem. Look below. There is a video on getting started with SharePoint and PowerApps. That's probably the best place for you to start. Go watch that video. Then come back over here once you understand PowerApps. So I'm assuming you guys have some PowerApps knowledge as we kind of dive into this a little bit. All right, so over here, let's switch back to our PowerApps tab. And so what you're going to see is that from a PowerApps point of view, the automatic process created us a screen. And then on that screen, they just put one SharePoint form. So a little bit different than the default SharePoint apps that normally have three screens, right? One for viewing, one for editing a new, and one for finding the item in the list. They went with it all in one screen. So that's going to be a little bit different. So we just have to kind of think about that. But what they've done is they've made this just a form. And so then just based on how you got here is going to determine what form mode this form is in, which is going to control a lot of what happens. And so the way you can figure that out is if you go up here and click on SharePoint integration, and it took me a long time to realize this. Actually, Microsoft had to be like, hey, if you click on that SharePoint integration, look, that's the list I'm using. That's one thing. But this is where you control the buttons, right? With PowerApps, we're used to seeing, the new and the save and all those buttons up here. And if we go over to SharePoint and we click on one of these guys, we get, an edit button, or, if we hit new or whatever over here, we get all these experiences. But in reality, over in PowerApps, we don't see those, but we can control them via this dropdown. So you'll see if someone clicks on a view, what does it do? It opens up the form, and it puts the form mode in view. If you do save, it's going to submit your form, right? You're pretty smart. You probably figured this out. Edit puts it in edit form. So this is very important to understand for two reasons. One is this is how it's figuring out what mode to be in. So it's showing you and giving you the proper experience you want. But two, as you get into those really crazy custom solutions and you want to have multiple things happen when someone hits the save button, for example, then you'll figure out, then go in here to on save and then semicolon, and then your crazy thing happening after this, right? So we're not going to get into that today, but I wanted to expose you to this because this was the biggest screw up that I had that took me a really long time to figure out until I finally got drug over the line of what it needed to be. Okay, so the first thing that I typically like to do with these forms is it really annoys me, right? When we were over here and we're in this edit experience, that we have a bunch of fields down here at the bottom, right? And we have to even scroll down to see them all. They're wasting screen real estate that I can't edit. So I'm going to go get rid of those, okay? And so the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go over here, right? Because we have one form, so you have to always be kind of thinking, and we end up using a lot of ifs. But if you go to the modified card, right? So we want the card property, so you can see it highlighted over here. We're going to go to the visible property for it. And right now it's set to true. Well, that's great, but we don't want it to be true. We're going to say instead if, and what we want to do is SharePoint form 1, right? So that is the form. See, it just highlighted green for us. Dot mode. So if the SharePoint form mode is equal to form mode dot view, then I want this to show up, right? But if it's not, so if it's in edit mode or it's in new mode, I don't want to see these properties I can't change. So we're just going to say false. Okay, so that simple little formula cleans up some real estate for us. So next trick is there's a whole bunch of fields here. I don't want to maintain, what if this formula changes what my logic wants to? I don't want to have to deal with this formula all the time. But I know that these guys always work as a group. Now you can't group data cards, unfortunately, but what you can do, so that was the modified one, right? Let's go to the editor. We're going to go to this guy and we're going to say, all right, your visible property, it's not true. It's not an if. Your visible property is just going to be the modified data card one visible property. So whatever that guy is, that's what we want to use for you because these guys are going to always be hidden together. No problem. So we'll go down here. We don't want department. No, favorite color. Nope, nope. See, when I set this up earlier, these are all tied together. So much nicer. So ID is one that I want to hide, right? So we'll say visible there. Paste that in. Boom. ID is hidden. Author. Yep. So who it's created by. Oh, don't change the height though. Click on visible here. And so then that one goes away. And then the last one is created. There he is, right? I just cheated and clicked on him. Made it easier to find him. Boom. So then now when my form's in new or edit mode, we're not going to have to worry about this. So what I can do, right? We'll say file, we'll say save, and then we'll say publish to SharePoint. Yep, publish that puppy. Now we'll switch over here. Here's another little trick to add to your book. If you hit refresh, all right, it reloaded. We click on CEO. There you go. You can see my little Power App loading. It takes it a second. And so if we say edit, all of these properties are still down here at the bottom. What did I do wrong? How did I get my logic wrong? We didn't. We didn't make any mistake other than you need to load this one time. Come over here, hit refresh again. Right? It's like the cache of the cache type of scenario. So we have to go and we reload the SharePoint page to get rid of that cache. Then we open the Power App and then we have to reload that page again to get rid of the Power Apps cache. Right? So now that we go back in here, CEO, right? So here's all these properties. If we say edit all, now they're all gone. Same thing. If we say new, they're not here. Woo! So just don't let that frustrate you. When you're working with these guys, cache and cache of cache, is that even a thing, right? I feel like I should be taking dollar bills and doing this right now. I've got one. Here you go. Here's my $1. Woo! Cache of cache is going to cause you some grief here. So just make sure that you aren't afraid to refresh. The other thing that I will do in some apps where I'm making only minor tweaks, so it's really hard to tell if it's happened or not, is I'll just throw a label on the screen and put this as V1, V2, V3, and just manually increment it. So that way when I do the refreshes, I can just see it. Do I have a V4? I do. Boom. And then once I get through my building and testing, then I'll delete that off the screen because my users don't need to see it. But it helps with the sanity for me. So another friendly trick. Okay, so now that we understand how that works, let's go back over to our Power Apps. All right, we'll just get over here. And so let's do a couple other cool things. So the next cool thing I want to talk to you about is before we go any further, right? So one of the downsides of what we just did here, hiding these fields, is that it can get you into trouble, right? You'll probably forget if you don't do this again for 2 years. The next guy, right, if you win the lottery, and you're on the beach drinking Mai Tais, they're not going to know. So help future you out or help future her out who's going to be supporting you. Help someone else out and do a little documentation. So go over here. Let's just do a new screen real quick. Blank. I'm going to call this documentation. I'll probably misspell documentation. I'm not even going to look. I don't want to know. And we'll say insert a label. Make it bigger. And we're just going to put some text in here, right? And we're just going to say the non-editable properties are hidden. Geez, well, Pete, I type really good. By boom. Right? And so you put better notes in that, but you get the idea. We now have created documentation right here within our app. And the great thing is there's no way for users to get to it, right? Only someone here in the editor experience has any access to it because I didn't put a link to it and they can't forcibly navigate to it. So documentation screen, that's going to save your butt later if you're having any problems with this. Okay. So that was the thing I wanted to show you there. So next up is let's take and customize this app just a little bit. So one of the things that I will warn you about is that this SharePoint form, it's a little funky sometimes. It does some things differently. It might not always work. So if you want to add some functionalities like a button to your app, what you want to do is just grab the form, right? So we're going to grab it way down here at the bottom. I'm going to pull it up, right? So now my screen has the form up here, yay. But now I have all this blank real estate to do something else. So for example, let's make a button that emails a link to, to this item for people, right? Maybe that was the functionality they wanted. Probably could do that out of the box with SharePoint, but we're just, baby steps, right? Mechanics, how this stuff works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw a text input on here. I'm going to drag it down here. Now, right, so make sure, see, text input is outside my SharePoint form. Looking over here on the left, it's outside the form. That's very important. If you get inside the form, you get weird behaviors. We don't want weird behaviors, right? We have enough problems in our lives. I'm going to get rid of default texts. I'm going to put a little hint text in here and say, enter an email address, like so. We'll rename this guy to email 2, very complicated name. Then we're going to throw a button on here. Same deal, right? So there's my button. I'm going to make sure that my button is outside of my form. And what happens if you put things in the form, if the form's in view mode, then everything's locked down to view mode, even if you tell it not to be locked down. It just becomes weird. So don't put things inside the form that you don't want actually in the form. Okay, so we're going to enter an email address. And so then for this button, we're going to send an email. And so the first thing we need to do that is add a data source. I'm going to say data source, add one. I'm going to choose the Outlook one. And there's a link on sending emails. So if like this goes too fast, it's all down below, documented in a separate video. So now we've added that. What we're going to do is we're going to go to this button. We're going to say on select. We want to do Office 365. Send email, right? If you're not seeing this, what's happened? You didn't do your data connection. And we're going to make the 2 be email2.text, right? So whatever they type in this box, we're going to send that to. Subject is going to be check out this item, like so. And then for the link, another trick here, One of the things you can do is right up here we have SharePoint integration, right? We can take advantage of our SharePoint integration. So we're going to say SharePoint integration dot selected dot, look, there's all the properties for the current item we're messing with. So I want the link property. But this comes up for a lot of people, right? We'll put the parenthesis on the end, because they're like, how do I figure out the ID or how do I get this stuff? They try and do complicated, weird stuff. SharePoint integration dot selected and its different properties are all there. So you don't have to overthink it. You know what item they're looking at right now. You have this available to you. So don't overdo it. Don't try and reference weird things. Use this SharePoint integration capability. All right, so that's like that. We'll make this button say email a link because that would be the politer thing to do. Probably make it bigger too, but we won't mess with that. You know how to visually make it better. So what we're going to do now, we're going to say file, save. We're going to publish it to SharePoint, publish to SharePoint. All right, then we'll switch back over here. We won't fall for the gag this time, right? We're going to do a refresh. We'll click on this guy, right? Because we need to load the Power App. All right, so that all loaded. We're going to hit refresh again just to save ourselves some pain and suffering because we know what happens if we don't. So we will click on the CEO, which is my wife. And so then now we have our cute little stuff. And so then now we can send me an email, Shane at powerapps911.com. Email me a link. Crossing our fingers. I will switch over to my Outlook over here. And just like that, I've got an email, right? So check out this item. It was to me, and there is a link that will open the item in my browser. So obviously you would do much nicer, fancier things, but hopefully that shows you gets those wheels spinning and kind of things you can do. All right, so we'll go back over here like so. So I think that kind of ties up what we want to do from SharePoint point of view. A couple of things to consider. The user that your users that are using this SharePoint list, they need to have a PowerApps license to use your PowerApps form. So make sure you cross that off the list, which, you know, if you're using pretty much all the Office 365 licenses come with it, you might just have to go into your user's licensing and check it to make that work. The other thing to keep in mind is let me open up another browser here real quick. All right, so this is a browser I have in incognito mode. And so I logged in as Chewy the dog. And so when Chewy opened this app for the first time, notice a couple things. Chewy has to allow, right? You need the permissions to open Power Apps. And then the first time he uses this, he has to allow those data connections. So just something to keep in mind also kind of with your users. The first time they use it, they're going to have to do it. And because we added that email link in this one, he has to agree to two different things. So it is what it is. It's not a huge deal, but it is something to make sure you're thinking about. That will happen the first time to your users. Oh yeah, I just remembered one more thing we needed to cover. What happens if you don't like the form? What if you want to get rid of it altogether? I didn't tell you how to undo this, right? Because maybe you want to play with it for a little bit. You're going to try some stuff. You're going to really mess it up. You're like, man, I just want to start over. Or maybe you deploy it and your boss is like, that's terrible. I want SharePoint out of the box forms. Well, bad boss on him. But let's talk about what this would look like. So if you go back over here to your list, and we'll get off of that. If you go to list settings, right there. So down here at the bottom under list settings, you have form settings. And so here you can see that it is currently using the modified app that we just created. And so there's a link to modify it. You can see some usage info. You could still customize with info path. Boo, info path. But if you want to get rid of it altogether, what you can do is you can say use the default form. So that would switch it back to using SharePoint's out of the box form. And then here is the link for delete a custom form pops up. So when I do these type of things, I end up having to do this over and over and over again. I end up deleting the custom form. And as soon as you click on that, it'll take you back and it'll be gone. So I'm not going to do that because as soon as I do that, I will need this for something and have to recreate it. So I'm not going to do it. But that's what you do is click on delete custom form. And then it's like you never had any of this happen. So just wanted to throw that in there. And I think that kind of puts us in a good spot. All right. So hopefully this at least gets you guys started is good foundational of how these pieces work, what you can do, and starts opening up your minds to some of the creative solutions. In the next video on this topic, right, I'm going to do things like we're going to add multiple screens. We're going to probably do some tabs at the top so you can kind of jump from screen to screen using some tabs. I think that's kind of fun. The other thing we'll do is we'll wire up departments to pull from a different list because I get that request all the time and people don't always understand how that works. So we'll do that again and we'll make this form a little fancier, but we'll save all that for next time. So thanks and have a great day. Hey, it's me again. If you got a second, click the subscribe button. That always keeps me making more videos. Or if you want to work together, need some help getting your Power Apps going, hit me up at PowerApps 911. Always happy to work together. Or finally, if you're really just looking for more videos, that's probably what it is, check out the Power Apps playlist over here and enjoy that. All right, thanks and have a great day.